You got to mute yourself.
The Rambam writes, Lo ye'odo bal schok umahaslos. A person should not be joyful and happy-go-lucky. There's some people, their personality is, when you speak to them, immediately, they don't have a serious moment. There's always whatever they say or they hear, right away they're like flippant. They deflect it with a comment, with a joke, which is really, to a degree, it has to do with deprecation, because you don't appreciate what it is. As a result of that, you deprecate, you make a joke of it, a light word. When you speak about something serious, you don't treat it lightly. You have to treat it for what it is. But a person has a personality that everything is taken lightly and everything is joyful. Then the person actually is not in a good place. You should not be melancholy or be stoic, but you should be happy. You should be joyous. There's different, joyful and joyous, a different word. Joyful means like happy-go-lucky. But you should be in a state of happiness. It's very interesting. We read in Pirkei Avos, who is the wealthy person? The one who's satisfied with his lot. Somech b'chelko. If a person is content, you're happy. Why? Because you have all you need. You don't need to be acknowledged. You don't need to be praised. As long as I have all I need, I'm content. Once you're content, you have joy. Joy is a direct outgrowth of what? Of content. Being joyful or fun has nothing to do with content, to be content. You can have a lot of fun, but fun very well is a distraction. A person is depressed and you put him on a roller coaster that goes 90 miles an hour, just going up. Could you imagine going down what it is? The person is distracted. It's a lot of fun, but it has nothing to do with joy. That person is not in a state of joy. Joy emanates from the inside of a person if you're content. If you're content, I'm joyful. I'm happy. That's called happiness. If you're a state of happiness, then you're wide open. You're able to embrace, and you have a sense of clarity that you take what you feel is valuable and you discard what you're not interested in. But a person is depressed. You're depressed or melancholy. You don't have the capacity even to appreciate what you should appreciate. You're deflected. You're in an irritable state. And if you're joyful, because you're so caught up with taking everything, being flippant, you can't give something of value that serious attention, and therefore you just gloss over it. And you minimize what it is. Therefore, he says you shouldn't be not exceptionally joyful and this deprecating type of mindset, or melancholy or stoic, because then you're going to what? You're going to miss, in either way, you're going to gloss and you're going to miss the point and not appreciate what has real value. This is the Rambam. The rabbis taught us, schok v'kalos rosh, being joking and levity. Margilis Adam Lavero. Ultimately, it conditions a person they're closer to sin. Because again, we have to create certain distance between ourselves. We naturally are inclined to do something which has to do with our physicality. And we're attracted to things which are contrary to what spirituality is. So intellectually, we recognize what they are. So if the intellect appreciates the wrongness of it, you rein in on yourself. What happens if that intellect is actually impaired due to this joyful mindset or due to being melancholy. Or the levity causes that you don't appreciate how wrong it is, therefore you don't keep your distance. You get too close to what? To the ervo. Right? Because Adam le'ervo, even forbidden relationship. Well, it's okay. I'll give you an example. Adultery, God forbid, is the most extreme level of violation of a sexual transgression. Incest also, but adultery. Now, how does a person come? Adultery doesn't happen in a moment. It's a gradual breakdown of distance between the person, the two individuals. They go, he'll make a certain kind of comment to the woman, which that kind of comment, only a person who has that relationship, like a husband to a wife. You're a stranger, you don't make that kind of comment. You compliment the woman about certain things about her person. It's inappropriate. Because the moment you compliment on that, that means you're focusing on her physical attraction. And that touches something in you and touches something in her. So you say, it's inappropriate. Say, what are you talking about? It's okay. Or you make a light remark, a cute remark about something, which really is overstepping your bounds. But you show, you're daring. Other people wouldn't make that comment, but you will make that comment. But that's due to your levity. That's why you make that comment. But you realize that comment automatically minimizes the distance between you and that woman, and she and you. Ultimately, once you break down all those barriers and you get close enough, due to the fact of the attraction between the two sexes, God forbid, the act of adultery takes place. That's what happens. Therefore, he says, schok, always being joking, this joyfulness, and levity. Levity is something which is a level of joyfulness, which is almost it manifests itself in deprecation. You say to a person, you mean you don't have a serious moment in your life? Even that. When are you gonna grow up and be serious? That's levity. We live in a society today. The whole concept of barriers, of what is and what's not, almost doesn't exist. They're trying to break down every barrier. If gender is, we don't put gender on a birth certificate any longer, God forbid. And a person doesn't know, is he male, female, or what or when? Married, not married, animal, human being. Therefore, you find bestiality, God forbid. You find adultery, you find incest, you find people taking their lives, committing suicide. They don't value themselves enough, and they feel that if it's too difficult, it's worthwhile to check out of life, because they don't appreciate and understand what the value of life is, because everything is on the cusp. Everything is so superficial, because they don't have enough time to focus on the reality of what it is, to appreciate what they're giving up, God forbid, when they do take their life. It's too frustrating. So for that, you take your life. Do you know what the value of life is? What you could accomplish? But in terms of what they see life is, what they could accomplish, it's not worth living. Because what they could accomplish is not worth very much. Rather than focusing on what they should be accomplishing, but they're not. Therefore, it becomes too frustrating. They forfeit their lives. And they'll do something, then in a moment, it's over. But this is all an outgrowth of lack of appreciation. So what doesn't give you the capacity to internalize, to appreciate something, what something is? I'll give you an example. No, there's a word in English, it's called consideration. And I always give the example, could you imagine, you just had a new couch It cost, your interior decorator said, this should be the manufacturer. The fabric should be imported from Italy. It costs you $200 a yard. And a person comes in with his work clothing, which are encrusted with mud and grease, and they sit down on your couch with those kind of clothing. The person, when he sees this happening, he cringes. A level of lack of consideration, it's an understatement. How do you do it? Because the person doesn't value anything but himself, and that is not important to him. It may not, even if it was only his own couch, he would sit on it too. But he doesn't put himself in the other person's place to understand what the other person doesn't want. It's only the way he sees it, the way he processes it. Therefore, he doesn't have that level of consideration, seeing the other person outside of himself. It would be my own couch, I'd sit on it with the clothing. And although I will stain it, a stain that can't even be taken out of the material, it doesn't make a difference. But that's only because it's a mindset. One's mindset, one's attitude determines exactly how you process life. Levity is going beyond the pale. Everything is what is beyond mockery. Mockery, when you mock something, that it's usually it's levity. Everything is a joke. You say, look, everything's not a joke. It's like, God forbid, I think Larry can appreciate this. Person goes to a funeral and people are dressed in black suits and says, you know, this looks like a wedding. Everybody, the only thing that's missing is the satin on the lapel. These would be tuxedos. You know, something. There's a time and place for every comment. God, unfortunately, there's a funeral take place. Is that a comment you make at a funeral? That the pallbearers look like ushers walking down the aisle at a wedding? How do you make that kind of comment? Everything's a joke. Because you don't appreciate the pain of the other person or what's going on. If only that person can make that kind of comment. You have a law on the books, and the law is never enforced. And because that people keep breaking the law, because it's never enforced, eventually people will not stop appreciating the wrongness of that crime. If the law is enforced and there are consequences to that behavior, you understand that behavior is unacceptable. Because people don't behave that way. But if that law is not enforced, it's just a law on the books, and that becomes the norm of behavior. If once it becomes the norm, you don't see it in that negative light any longer. That's the norm. It's not the end of the world if you steal. At worst, it's a misdemeanor. Yeah. There was a holdup, it's a misdemeanor. He only didn't shoot him because the gun misfired. That's why he didn't kill him as a holdup. But it's a misdemeanor. It's a misdemeanor. People walking into stores and looting the store, taking everything, all the items off the shelves. You don't find a policeman. And these people walk off, nobody's prosecuted. And you have it on camera. It's on film. The police are not even looking at the films. So what happens? These people, they're going to become repeated offenders, but they don't see themselves as offenders. They have a right. Of course, why do they see it as a right? Because evidently, if they weren't reined in the first time, evidently people appreciate that they have a right to take because they have a right. Because all these stores are actually parasites. They're victimizing all these unfortunate people. That's the lens they see it in. It's disastrous. It's a breakdown of society. So a person that conducts himself with levity and with deprecation, automatically he gets closer and closer to that line, which he should not cross that line. But he's very close to crossing that line. Anger is one of the most negative traits that a person could possess. Why is anger? Because when a person becomes angry, you become irrational. And therefore, the Talmud says you should not try to appease a person when he's angry. Because a person feels offended and he's angry. You're going to try to reason with him. when he's in this angry state. When he's in the angry state, he's slightly out of control. He's lacking clarity due to the anger which has overtaken his emotion. So that person doesn't have the capacity now to process what you're telling him. Therefore, you wait till he calms down, and then you try to speak to him. But when he's in the state of anger, because of that irrational edge that he has, you can't get through. He doesn't have the capacity to appreciate what you're telling him. When a person, God forbid, takes his life, there's also that frustration causes anger. The person is living irrationally. His emotion, his mindset is irrational. When a person is irrational, it's not worth it. There's an expression in English, people cut off their nose to spite their face. What do you mean? But if you can cut off your nose and you're the victim, what are you doing? You're hurting yourself. The person's upset with his employer because he didn't get the bonus. And he says, I'm going to tell off my employer. His colleague said to me, you realize you may have not gotten the bonus, but at least you have a base salary. You tell off the employer, they're going to give you your walking papers. You're not going to be able to support your family. Doesn't make a difference. I'm going to tell them off. But you're going to regret it. You're going to lose your job. What? And they're talking sense to him. He doesn't have the capacity to appreciate what he's being advised. That's cutting off your nose to spite your face. The same idea. So people, they're easily angered, easily frustrated. And the reason why the frustration is so overwhelming is because they don't appreciate the positive side of life. So if you compare what I'm experiencing now to what it is, the person allows himself to be touched so negatively because he says it's not worth it. But if you see all the other opportunities at the same time, the frustration doesn't touch you in such a bad way, or the disappointment doesn't touch you in such a bad way. That's the understanding. A person shouldn't be breached, meaning just uncontrolled. Everything is a joke. You have to be able to have restraint. People have an urge. They have a comment. They always have a cute remark to make. You know something? Tone it down a little bit. Horitz means when you're breached. You're not able to control yourself. And you should be always a state in grieving. You're always grieving. You're always melancholy. There's certain people, they're never satisfied. And they always feel they're always getting the short end of the stick, as they say. Why don't you count your blessings? If you count your blessings and see how fortunate you are, you'll appreciate that you're not getting the short end of the stick. But a person who's his demeanor, his mindset, his emotional state, he's always grieving, he's always feels he's really not making the grade. He's grieving. This is very important. Rather, you should accept everybody with a happy countenance. What does that mean? The Ramchal writes in Mesillas Yesharim that external behavior affects internal feelings. Meaning, if you walk around with a smile, even inwardly a person is not happy, but if you outwardly put a smile on your face and you have a positive demeanor and people interact with you with that positive demeanor, ultimately you'll be affected and internally you'll be happy. External actions, and he gives an example. You have a flame that's flickering to go out, and now you fan it. As you fan that little flicker of light, a fire, you ignite it into a large flame. It becomes inflamed. Identically. Internally, you feel down. But outwardly, you behave as if everything's great. That outward behavior ultimately will activate a positive inner feeling. And that's what he says. Therefore, if you have any relevance to this, you should accept everybody, b'sev upon yofos. Always have that positive countenance. Greet everybody happily. Because when you do, the interaction with others are positive, and you're touched by that positiveness. And when you're touched by positive, it affects you internally, that you start feeling internally positive. Many years ago, there was a person who came to Shai Gold's class, which was Larry's stomping grounds, and he graduated Harvard. This person came a Baal Tshuva, and he said that he was raised by his parents that everything, they're critical of everybody. Everything they see in the negative. The glass is always half empty, never half full. How does he change it? Here he wants to be more positive, but he was raised, his parents, his whole life was experience of seeing things in the negative. How does he see people in the positive? That's the question he asked me. So what I said, you see, coming to this class, the average person in this class is a positive person. If you allow yourself to be exposed to people who are positive, ultimately you'll become positive. You'll see things in a positive light, not in a negative light. But if you're in an environment where everybody's negative, you become negative. Environment is crucial. That's external. The external atmosphere affects a person, and ultimately he will change. And because you come in touch with it. One's own outward behavior. Having makabel is called odom sending upon the office. You accept everybody with a happy countenance. That external positiveness impacts on you internally, that you become positive and you become a happy person. You're not stoic and melancholy. You become vibrant. It's a known fact that a person has tremendous anxiety. Now, how do you minimize anxiety? It's a known fact that if you exercise and you rev up your system, it actually minimizes the anxiety. It makes you feel good about yourself. You feel the positiveness. So you see, the external, doing that physical activity, the exercise, exerting yourself, causes somehow that anxiety to dissipate. Because you start feeling the good. When you start feeling the good, that minimizes the negative. But again, this is all Chazal. Although the Rambam was a doctor and he was a philosopher, all this is rooted, it's stated in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos or in the Gemara. This is the rule book or the guidebook on life. How to maximize on everything we're endowed with. You have to be positive. You can't be deprecating. You can't have levity. How do you contend with all these issues? We're so susceptible to these things. He's teaching how to do it. But all this is culled from the Gemara or from the Mishnah, exactly how a person's behavior impacts negatively and positively on a person in terms of how he internalizes how he functions. You shouldn't be too expansive. Meaning you have an insatiable need for material. As much as you have, you want more. Legally. You're not doing anything dishonest. But when it comes to the material, if I could have more, why not? And whenever you see that financial opportunity or physical, you're overtaken by it. So what does that mean? Your life, you don't control your life. The external controls you. It's like a person has an addiction. When you see that opportunity, immediately see food, you start salivating. Person's a glutton. You just finished eating. What are you salivating? The person has an insatiable appetite. Certain people for material, as much as they have, another antique, another something, another piece of property. Add a room to your house, furnish it. There's a limit. What do you need it for? You have a 16-car garage and you have 2 cars. What do you need 16-car garage for? And you even put a gas pump near the garage to fill up, if you have to fill up as if it would be a bus depot. What's this all about? The answer is, person, you never know. I have high expectations. It's foolishness. You're allowing this uncontrolled need for material to dictate your life. You're not living your life as in a meaningful way. You become overwhelmed. And that's what greed is all about. What's a greedy person? Greedy person, as much as he has, the greed drives him and overtakes his life. Your life is not really in your control. Therefore, he says, you should not have this broad, insatiable need for material. That whenever you see material, you're overwhelmed when you see that opportunity. It's like a bull in a china shop. A bull who sees that red cape, the bull goes after it. If you have that type of predilection, insatiable, the moment you see that opportunity, you're after it.